If you had the chance to send a message to your younger self, what would that message be?
Yes. So I would say my number one recommendation would be to just trust your expertise, because this is something that I've seen in many different fields, and especially with dietitians. When I've mentored some dietitians and writers, a lot of us have imposter syndrome, whether we have 2 years of experience or 10 years of experience, and feel like, you may feel like you don't have enough experience to call yourself a writer or a media expert or any other sort of name that you're trying to pursue. But you have to trust in your expertise, because typically you're going to know so much more about the field than the person even that may be hiring you. And they want your expertise, and know that, trust that you have something to offer. You should promote it and show it in every way you can, because that's how you're going to build trust in others.
Well, hey there. Welcome to Media Savvy, the podcast that gives you a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to get noticed by media and become the go-to expert that they keep coming back to. I'll be sitting down with successful writers, producers, and entrepreneurs to learn the tools and tactics they use to build their reputation and in turn boost their business. I'm your host, Bonnie Taub-Dix, and I've been working with top-tier media outlets for more than 30 years, anywhere from traditional print publications to online and social platforms. And I'm sharing my nutrition guidance without gimmicks. But you don't have to be a dietitian for this podcast to speak to you. Through my one-to-one conversations, you'll learn how to build a strategy to get your name in the news and establish yourself as an authority in your field, no matter what the industry. With Media Savvy, I'm on a mission to inspire, motivate, and empower you to have the confidence and tools you need to shine in the spotlight. Are you ready? Let's get Media Savvy. Well, hello there. Welcome back to the Media Savvy podcast. I'm your host, Bonnie Taub-Dix, and today we're diving into a topic that I get asked about so often in my media trainings, and that's about writing for publication and writing for brands. So, of course, you could write your own blog or Substack, but when you get published in a magazine or newspaper, or you have the opportunity to partner with a brand and you write for them, that's where the money is, so to speak, and also literally. And today I'm thrilled to have with us someone who gets published so often in top-tier publications. And the way we met is that she actually interviewed me for several of her stories, but her writing and her media skills have really taken her even further. So let me introduce you to Melissa Mitri. And Melissa is a registered dietitian, a freelance writer, weight loss expert, and speaker for over 18 years. And she has experience in the dietetics profession for that long. Melissa works as a freelance writer and a reviewer for top-tier media outlets, as well as food and supplement brands. She is regularly featured expert for publications such as Forbes, Very Well Health, Shape, Eating Well, and many more. And she serves as an expert consultant and advisor for health and wellness applications. Welcome to the show, Melissa. So nice to have you on Media Savvy.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, for having me. I love your podcast, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm just so curious, what was your first major breakthrough? And did you make that happen, or did it happen to you? So could you share a little bit about your journey in working with media and actually being media?
Yeah, sure. So I would say it kind of started when I started writing for Everyday Health, one of the publications that I write for, and when I got that opportunity. So how that kind of happened is, and why I feel like that was my kind of turning point in my media career, is I would definitely say I sort of indirectly made it happen, and I'll explain a little bit more why that is. I got the writing gig writing for Everyday Health from an editor that I used to work with at another smaller outlet in the past. And so there's a lot of ways that you can find these opportunities, but it's always nice when you have the editor reach out to you versus you having to pitch and seek out the work yourself. And so I had a really great working relationship with this editor from the past role that I had. But unfortunately, at the time, they had to cut their writing budget for that smaller outlet. but we kept in touch. And then about 6 months later, she started as an e-commerce editor for Everyday Health. And so she was looking for new writers, and she connected with me to see if I was interested. And I was so excited because I was trying to find these opportunities, when I had free time and pitching to various outlets and things. It takes time to find those opportunities. But because I kept in touch with her and always provided quality work for that role I had in the past, I think this was really helpful to keep me front of mind when she was looking for more writers in the future. And so when I started writing for Everyday Health, I noticed that I started getting more other opportunities because my name was, the byline in these really well-known for this really well-known outlet and very well-respected outlet. And so when I started pitching to other major media outlets like Eat This, Not That, and connecting with other journalists and sharing my clips from Everyday Health, I think that it helped to give me a lot more clout and showing that I write for this publication. And also the type of writing that I was doing for Everyday Health is a little bit more challenging, kind of like the e-commerce type of content that is longer articles, more doing product reviews, writing about supplements. And so it really showed that I had that skill set. And then since then, I started writing for Eat This, Not That, Lose It, and other outlets where I'm finding that it's feeling easier to find these opportunities without having to pitch as much to them.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't know that that was your backstory. One of my biggest opportunities that I started with was Everyday Health also. And I wrote for them for about 2.5 years, but that was when they started a blog. So I used to write a blog for them, which is very different than what they wound up turning into because those blogs were mostly personal. And it was, really about stories I would be talking about with my private patients or things that colleagues would ask me or something I'd read in the newspaper and then write a story about that. So it was so nice to be able to write blogs for them because I could write in my voice the way I wanted to write. If I wanted to interview someone, I could, but it could have just been mine. And I also did once a month Twitter chats with them when it was called Twitter. And that was also so much fun because it really helped me to build my presence on that platform. But it also gave me a chance to connect with a lot of other people. And just like you're talking about, and I know we'll talk more about this, relationships, the way that I started working with Everyday Health is because one of the reporters that I worked with wound up working there. And she knew that I could give her quality information. And that's how that whole thing started. So relationships really are the foundation for most of the stuff we do. Wouldn't you agree?
For sure. I would definitely agree that that's so important and can bring a lot of opportunities more authentically. And so that's really interesting that you had worked for Everyday. And it's funny because I did write for a lot of other more brands, which I know we'll talk about more too. And that's kind of how my writing initially started. But I feel like I had it all kind of just continued as a trend when I started writing for Everyday Health. And then simultaneously, I also wanted to mention I was also providing quotes for a lot of journalists and editors. I know that's something that you do as well. Many of us writers also are the ones that are often providing expert quotes for the writers and the journalists. And while I was doing that over time, providing really helpful quotes, I noticed that more journalists were starting to seek me out for quotes because they knew that I would provide the quotes on time for them, try to exceed their deadline. And then that also helped to get my name out there more quickly because I didn't have to seek out those opportunities to be quoted in the media. They were finding me more from those, again, building the relationships with those journalists.
That was actually the next question that I was going to ask you, but you kind of answered it already. But I was going to ask you about providing value before you even land a gig. And it's funny, if I think I've talked about this before on my show, that I was once asked to do a time management survey. And I realized that I spend most of my time doing quotes for these publications, which I'm not directly getting paid for. But what you just said is so important, is that that's where you get noticed. When your name shows up over and over and over again in these top tier publications, that's when sometimes editors and other writers see you. They see that you could provide value and then use you to write stories or for more quotes.
Right, because then they trust your authority and they know that you have the expertise because you're providing those quotes to them. You don't necessarily have to start out as the writer, but starting out as providing those helpful quotes, like you said, even if you're not directly getting paid for them right away, they do often lead to a lot of other opportunities. And so that's one of the things that you can do that I think for listeners to be helpful if you're just starting out and you want to land whether it's writing gigs or other opportunities to work with the media, is just really providing really value before you even ask for work. I think can be really helpful. And of course, there are boundaries. You know, you don't want to spend 40 hours a week providing quotes necessarily, but if you are able to provide quotes that are related to your niche, that are maybe a little bit easier for you to provide, where you already have that expertise and you don't have to do a ton of research to provide those quotes. I think those can be ideal, or finding a mix between different opportunities. But I think first and foremost, just establishing a genuine connection with the editors and with those that you may want to work for first and foremost, and just being helpful. Not sending. And I know a lot of people do this, but it personally for me, it's always worked better and feels more natural to just establish a connection with someone first. Say, for example, on LinkedIn, or wherever you find that person is the most active, and just saying hello and connecting with them and letting them know what you do, and just say like, I'm really happy to be connected with you, and us to support each other without having an ask right away in those first few conversations, and then letting the relationship build where maybe they know that you are, what your expertise is in, when you establish that introduction, and then they can start calling on you if they need quotes for their articles, and just offering that as kind of that initial support and connection and letting it build from there.
What you are talking about right now is so key. And I think that I may have to use that as my snippet before the show, because this is something that a lot of people don't take the time to do. And
Mm-hmm.
although I have, a love-hate relationship with social media, the fact is that it is different than it used to be in the past, because now you could reach out to reporters, you could comment on their posts, you could compliment them, which who doesn't like a good compliment? You could
Right.
provide value to a post that they wrote that you have nothing to do with. But if you have something to say about it, you can even write in the comments, because what we're talking about here is how to stay top of mind. How do
Mm-hmm.
you maintain these relationships with editors and brands so that they call upon you for future products? I think that's exactly what we need to do without first getting hired for a story. You can't just expect them to find you and ask you to write a story. You have to be there ahead of time. And this is exactly what is, to me, key.
Right. I completely agree, because once you start to establish that connection, whether it's messaging them directly and introducing yourself and then starting to comment on their posts, they get to know your name first before you start maybe pitching a story. It doesn't mean that you never pitch a story idea, or ask them for paid opportunities, but you build that relationship a little bit first, because these editors are getting so many emails and messages in a given day, especially those that are actually posting job positions on LinkedIn. I see it all the time. Like when they see editors for big media outlets that are posting job positions, there's hundreds of people that are responding. And to them, if they don't know your name, and think about from there, you always have to think of it from their perspective. They're not going to have the time to sort through all of the messages. They're probably going to sort through the ones that they get first, and then the names that they're familiar with. So even if they don't know you that well yet, but they recognize your name, and they say, oh, I remember this person. We've had a conversation before. They're more likely to open your email versus just a cold pitch from someone that they've never connected with. No matter how great your pitch is, it could be amazing. But if you don't have that initial connection with them, they're less likely to even open your email to know how amazing you are in the first place.
It's so true. And I've had so many writers on my show, and I ask them questions that are also around this. And they always say, well, they open up my emails because they know me.
Mm-hmm.
So to
Yes.
me, I think that's number one. Also, next would be probably a killer subject line. But I think that even killer subject lines, people know that that's important, but there's that extra layer of comfort for an editor when they also know the person that they're opening the email from.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So, but freelancers often worry about appearing too eager when they're following up with reporters. So, what's your advice for balancing like a regular check-in, how to avoid being too pushy, but also yet not be too passive? I know that one of the things that I do is if I was going to send out a pitch letter, at the end, I usually say something like, hope you don't mind, but I'll contact you again next week to see, just to check in, as opposed to
Mhm.
waiting for them to get in touch with you. Do you have any ideas for how to check in but not be too pushy?
Yeah, sure. So it's definitely a fine line, but I personally feel that it's always better to over communicate a little bit rather than under communicate and be fearful to check back. So again, kind of just starting with thinking about that person on the receiving end of your message or email. They're probably getting bombarded with hundreds of messages a day. And so if you sent out that initial pitch and you didn't get a response, then it doesn't mean that they are not interested. It could be a 50-50 chance that they just didn't even get to read your email and they intended to. Or maybe it's not the right time for them. There's a lot of different variables that could be going on. But if you don't check in regularly enough, your message is more likely to get lost in the mix. I think like to relate it back to social media or anything you're trying to promote or sell in your business is, if you're only posting once, most likely are only sending email once to your email list selling something, then the numbers are going to be pretty low in terms of how many people are actually going to buy from you because they need to have reminders. And so it's kind of the same thing when you're reaching out to editors is trying to follow up. I usually recommend just checking back every 1 to 2 weeks or so. This is not a hard, fast rule, but thinking that, giving the person time to kind of catch up with what they're working on in a given week, where it's not too far out that you're checking back and then forgetting about that topic that you want to write about, especially if it's a timely topic that you're pitching to them. And so checking back every 1 to 2 weeks, and I kind of like to use the rule of three and like checking back up to 3 times. So if you don't hear back after that first time, waiting about a week or so, checking back in. And I like your idea too of I always also try to do that with at the end of the email, being clear on your action item. So letting them know, like, I will check back if I don't hear from you. I understand you're busy. I think just showing that empathy and that understanding that you know where they're coming from. If they don't respond right away, you understand that they're
Mm-hmm.
very busy, and that you'll follow up in a week or so, and just check back. And so if you do that 2 to 3 times and you get to the third time and they still don't respond, then on that third time, you can say, this is something that I often do, is just say, I understand you're busy, kind of just reiterating that, but then also kind of closing with, if you're not interested or if this is not a good time for you right now, please let me know so I can, kind of just saying in a professional way, like I can, kind of let it be for now, and I won't be in your inbox anymore right now, and that type of thing to kind of just close the conversation, and then it's a way to kind of almost push for a little bit of a response. You may still not get a response, but it's possible that it's a little bit of a higher likelihood because you're kind of leaving it to them and making it really clear. If they just skim through your email and they open it and they see, okay, if you're not interested, please let me know, so that then it's helping them to not receive any additional emails that are just not relevant to them right now.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing that's important to do before you send that pitch is to know the publication.
Mm-hmm.
Besides knowing their voice and their language, you also need to know what they've written about recently, because you don't want to pitch a story about red dye if they just did something on that, unless you
Mm-hmm.
have something new to say and something that's fresh information. So sometimes you won't hear from an editor because they've already done something like that. And I have a newsletter. I have a newsletter for what I call BTD media makers that I send out regarding media. But I also have another newsletter that I've done for 10 years, which is really for the public. And in
Mm-hmm.
that newsletter, I send out all the articles that I'm quoted in. So every, few weeks, I'll send out a newsletter that has different articles that I've been quoted in. That's also great for people who are working with media, because then they get to see what the headlines are saying. They get to see what
Mm-hmm.
reporters are looking for. So it's not just about media, but You could look at Bonnie Taub-Dix on Instagram. You could sign up for that newsletter. But I think what you're saying is also, again, so key. And I really want to underscore it, that you have to do your homework and look at what else is written, because sometimes you may be rejected, not because the topic isn't a good one. In fact, it was so good that they already covered it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I completely agree with that too. And that is why being timely and relevant to the publication, as you said, especially like the red dye at 3 and all these really timely topics, they're usually the media, if it's already out in one outlet, then they're probably already working on it. And so I think ways of knowing kind of how to get ahead of the game, or if you notice, if you have develop a system of keeping track of trends, say once a week, and then once you hear about something right away, that's when you want to pitch and let them know that you can write that article as soon as possible, if that's a starting point, because they're going to want that article written in 48 hours, if it's a really timely topic, because they don't want to be the last one to have it. And I also agree with what you said about, kind of suggesting a spin on one of those topics. So a lot of times when I'm pitching article ideas to either the editors that I already work with, or somebody I don't know that well yet, is really researching what they had written about in the last 6 to 12 months, and seeing, and you can search if you have some ideas right in the back of your head. You can search for those topics so that you can see what's already been done related to that kind of overall topic, and then you can suggest a spin on that topic or share new research, because you're showing you're doing the legwork. You're showing that you already know what they're writing about, but you're really offering something new and fresh, and that is more likely to grab their attention, especially when you put it in the subject line specifically.
And I have a perfect example for that. So about a week or so ago, I got a call from someone who used to be my editor, Anna Medeiros. And in fact, I interviewed her on my show a few episodes ago. And she wanted me to talk about the red dye situation, but the spin on it, because you have to understand that what you just mentioned is that when something hits the news, tons of people are already commenting on that and perhaps
Mm-hmm.
writing about it. But what she asked me to comment on is it was for AARP magazine. And if someone has been consuming red dye for 50 years or more, would that have more of an impact on them? And what are the consequences of that? So it really was a different spin on the same topic. It was short, introduced what is red dye, blah, blah, blah. But it had a different spin on it. And I kind of like that, because that attracts a whole different audience.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. There's always so many spins you can take on different various topics depending on the audience, as you said. So really knowing your audience is so key. When you are reaching out to them and providing ideas, because a topic you might recommend, or the way that you're wording it, is going to be different depending on the outlet. Like AARP versus Shape magazine is completely different.
Cosmo.
Yeah, exactly. So really knowing and doing your legwork. It's not just like a generic pitch that you're sending out.
Right, for sure. So just like changing gears a little bit, we know that media work often conjures up images of on-camera appearances, but you've highlighted that off-camera opportunities could be a major avenue of income for you. So since so many of the people I have media trained shy away from working with media because they're maybe camera shy or introverted or whatever, they'd love to get their names in the news, but they're really afraid of going in front of the camera. So what are some other ways when someone might be either not camera ready, or maybe they have other limitations, like they have young children around all the time? How could they thrive in media when, or do brand collaborations without actually having their faces in the spotlight?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are so many opportunities to work with media, even if you don't want to be on camera. I think that TV appearances and on camera appearances is what a lot of people might initially think of when they think about working with large scale media. But there are so many other opportunities that you can have working behind the scenes in different areas. For example, a long list of things. So you can provide, starting with providing the expert quotes for articles, I think is a great place to start if you are new and working with the media, because that's kind of the easiest way to get started and get your name out there. But you can pursue freelance writing opportunities, writing articles, blogs, newsletters. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just the traditional articles in the major media outlets, but potentially blogs for different websites, their newsletters, applications. So health and wellness applications. I consult and write for a few health and fitness apps. And so depending on your area of expertise, there's a lot of opportunity there as well. You can write social media content. You can be, again, the behind the scenes, writing social media captions or creating images if that's something that you love to do. But just not necessarily have to be the one that's on camera. You can be an editor, you can be a medical reviewer where you're reviewing articles rather than writing them. So you're reviewing them for accuracy, fact checking the content, checking references to make sure that they match up to what the article is saying. And other areas, you can do recipe development if you love to cook and create recipes. A lot of brands and outlets are looking for recipe developers, and this is kind of like a niche area that a lot of professionals love, and it's very in demand. Photography, so whether that's if you work in the nutrition space, food photography, or any other space that you work in, and taking photos for articles. You can do food or product development, help with the development or modification of products, whether that's food, supplements, etc. You can be an expert consultant to brands where you're not necessarily writing, but you're providing expertise for maybe the development of apps, or you could create product descriptions or marketing materials for brands. So there are a ton of different things that you can do that don't involve being on camera. I know that for myself personally, I do have a goal of being on camera more or doing more like TV segments in the future. But for me, I have two young kids. My kids are still they're 7 and 9 years old. And so I'm still very, I'm home. I need to be home a lot at certain times and be able to be there for them and pick up and drop off. And so the idea of like getting up at 4 a.m. for a TV segment right now just probably doesn't work for my current stage of life. But in the future that may change. And so I think just knowing, what you might be best at, not fearing the camera necessarily, but if you feel like it's just not the right time in your life or it's just not for you, like, but you want to work with media, like there are so many ways and you can always change your mind in the future, right? Like if you start doing some of the behind the scenes stuff, and you start to build up your confidence in working with media and brands, then you may change your mind in another couple of years and decide that you want to pursue more on camera opportunities. So there's a lot of different options out there.
You just brought back the memory of so many funny stories. I remember there was one time a camera crew was coming to my house and I had 3 kids and my husband just had his tooth pulled and
Oh
I made
no.
everyone go upstairs and
Yeah,
tell them you better be quiet. and
yeah,
and
it sounds
and it
tough.
was just like so funny. I really owed them for that one. And then there was another time when I was actually getting my legs waxed and I got a call from a TV show that said that they wanted to come to my house and do an interview. And then I had to pick up my son and I went home. And when he came home from school, I said, listen, I think they want a kid in the interview. It was about breakfast cereals. He said, what are you talking about? I said, listen, you're going to have to be on TV today. And it was just like one of those funny situations. I have so many stories like this, but it's one of
Hmm.
those things where you just have to juggle sometimes.
Yes,
And it's not
yes,
easy, but it turns out to be a funny story later on. When you're doing it, it's not that funny at all. But you
I'm
also
sure.
said something else that I really wanted to, again, just shine a light on. And so many times people say to me, oh, I saw your name in this story. I saw your name, whether it's patients of mine or colleagues. And I never hear that when I wrote the story.
Mm,
When I'm quoted in a story, they all tell me that. When I took the time to write this whole story, no one ever
yeah.
says, oh, I saw your story. So those quotes are really key.
That's yes, I completely agree with that too. That's so interesting too that that people notice that more. But I've also experienced that where a lot of times whether I'm sharing the article or somebody else is sharing an article that I was quoted in, and that people notice it more when I'm quoted, or they just assume that a lot of times that I even wrote the article because my name
Right.
is in the article and they're probably just skimming it and don't really see who wrote it. So I always, when I'm sharing myself, I always, of course, give credit to the writer who actually wrote it, and then tag any of the other experts that were quoted in the article as well. But you're right. It's like just getting your name out there in any way possible, because the reality is a lot of consumers are just skimming through most of these articles. I know that we spend a lot of time, like I said, and energy researching, writing these articles, but that's why we need to make it really clear and have these headings, because people are just skimming through and they're trying to find the most important information that relates to them, what they're looking for.
And along those lines with a quote, make sure that when you're quoted in the story, that you're also giving yourself credit for something that is really important to you. So I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say, Bonnie Taub-Dix, comma, mom of three, because that doesn't get me anywhere. But if you say the name of your book or the name of your podcast or your website,
Mm-hmm.
those things could be very important for you. And, I know I've mentioned this before, that I get passive income from the books from my book that's sold. And I
Mm-hmm.
never do any advertising for that, but it just comes from being quoted as author of the name of the book. People look it up and then they buy the book. So
Mm-hmm.
be sure that you're citing yourself with something that's really important to you.
Yeah, that's a great tip. It's really making the most out of that quote too, and then helping to drive people to your book or to your podcast, to your brand in general. And so really giving yourself that, sharing your credentials and your expertise so that that starts to stick and people start to remember you too, especially when you start being quoted in a lot of articles. That really helps kind of build your name.
Yeah, for sure. So, besides being an incredible writer, I know that you've partnered with a lot of brands. And could you just give us an idea of what that might typically involve? How does someone position themselves to work with the brand? Sure, I understand that you'd get known because of the stories that you're writing, but have you also reached out to brands? Did they reach out to you? Could you
Mhm.
give us a little idea about what these collaborations are like?
Yeah, sure. So I actually started working with brands a little bit earlier on in my writing career before I started working for some of these larger media outlets like I do now. And so, kind of the history behind it is when I started as a writer, I started writing for uh, a dietitian, Anna Reisdorf. You're probably familiar with her. She runs like the Arties Who Write Facebook group, and she's very well known in our field. And so I started writing for her and her team, and a lot of the writing clients that she worked with were brands. So we're directly writing for their blogs, for different food and nutrition supplement brands, and sometimes for their email newsletters, different projects. And so I had started out, that was kind of the type of writing that I had started out in, kind of more like content marketing writing, where I was writing educational content for their blogs and articles, but kind of making sure that I'm including the brand name and kind of mentioning the products several times throughout the article in a natural way when it fit. And so over time, I kind of maintain those connections, and then it gave me more of the confidence to apply for and connect with other brands that I loved, that I was familiar with, or just saw that they were looking for writers. And so it started out with more writing, traditional writing roles, writing for brands, and again for their blogs, because most brands have a blog. They might have other areas where they need content as well, like their newsletters, like their social media. So there's a lot of areas in terms of writing that you can pursue with working with brands. But then it can also lead to other opportunities, which is, for example, a few of the opportunities that have opened up for myself is I started working for these brands, writing for them. But then again, establishing that good connection with them, keeping in touch with them, and providing quality work that over time it opened up where, for example, one of the brands that I write for the past 3 years, now I'm going to conferences like when I had seen you at Fancy, that was one of the brands that I think at the booth that I was working in where I had seen you, and then I was representing them at expos and conferences and other opportunities to travel and support them in getting their name out there. And so those are other opportunities that you can pursue as you start continue working for a brand and really understand what their brand is all about, and they trust you. Other opportunities where I started writing for like health and wellness applications, like I mentioned, and then I started as a writer for blogs, but then it transitioned to more consultant work. I think the writing world is always changing too. I think it's important to note that with kind of like as AI has grown more popular and utilized that temporarily, it had changed some things in the writing space, that there was kind of a temporary time where I was providing more like consulting work and like reviewing articles and doing other things that, so I think it's important to kind of roll with the punches too, because it might actually in the long term bring more opportunities and different things that you can do. So you can, again, like write content for applications. Like one of the health and wellness apps that I write for now, I also like they have different challenges that they do throughout the months for their users, and I write the content for that. I'm kind of like the back end coach for them. So there's so many different areas that you can work in, again, on the back end, if that's something that you're more interested in.
That's so true. And being a consultant, I know that for some of the brands that I work with, it just means being in touch. And also when I see an article that I read, or I hear something on TV that pertains to them, or I read a scientific study that pertains to them, I'll just send it to them and their team. And they really appreciate that because they're doing their own thing. They're not necessarily looking for those things. So I think when you could be the eyes and ears for them, that then they want you to also be the voice for them. And that's when they may hire you to do TV shows and to be writing and to do so many other things that you may not even started out doing those things in your contract.
Exactly. But it could bring other opportunities if you're providing good work and you really start to understand the brand and offer value. Then they know that they have this consistent person that really understands their brand message, and you can share it in various ways. And I think just knowing, even as a starting point, that these brands really want your expertise, that a lot of the people that might be hiring you from the brands they have a marketing background or a sales background, but a lot of them don't have the expertise and background that you have in understanding their consumer, understanding the science or whatever it is within your niche, that you offer that higher level expertise, and they're seeking that. They're seeking your help with their content to make it easier to understand for their audience.
Sure. And, just as an important tip, when you have a contract with the brand, it's also a good idea to have some sort of an addendum to the contract where you're saying, if this comes up, then this would be my fee and this is what I could do. And I'll give you a perfect example of that I was working with a company that was an avocado commission, and we had in the addendum, if something for TV comes up, this is what I charge, blah, blah, blah. And as it turns out, I was able to land a Cinco de Mayo story, and I wound up doing this story for them. So it was extra income for me. It was so much fun, but it was also a lot of play for them to get on a national TV show at Cinco de Mayo. When you are an avocado company, that is really, your heart. Really. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. So even though it's not in your contract with the brand, I often tell them, well, these are also other things I could do. And if these things come up, then this is what my fee would be. And this is how I would do it. And you could put those in your contract, even though you're not hired for that, because you never know. You really never know.
I agree. That's a great idea to have that in there, because you're also just, kind of letting that brand know that you have these other areas that you can help them with too. So if there's one area that maybe they're changing their content plan, and or they're using somebody in-house for something that you initially signed up to help them with, and they know they could look back at that contract and remember that you have these other skills, these other areas that you're open to helping them with. And so it makes you more marketable to them too.
Right. Exactly. Now, I know that besides writing and working with brands, that you also have a private practice. Like I also have one, which I've had my private practice for more than 30 years. And some of the people in my practice I have known for that long. It's not that they're not successful, but it became more like a life coaching kind of thing as opposed to a nutrition consulting business. So how do you find that your private practice complements the media work that you do and helps you to stay relatable?
Yeah, I think working with clients in private practice, no matter how small, like I work with probably like a good handful of clients week to week because I do spend more time on like the writing and media work. But I've always wanted to maintain a private practice because it keeps me current and relatable. And it really keeps me up and up on what questions that consumers that people have. And, a lot of times like my clients help me keep up with the trends. They might see they're very active on social media, like Instagram and TikTok, and they see trends and then they ask me during our sessions. And so then I'll look them up and, after our session and, kind of make note for potential story ideas that I can pitch to my editors. I've noticed it kind of works both ways where it helps my clients because I am a writer and I am keeping up with the trends on my end. So it helps me. It helps my clients because I'm very aware of the different products that are coming out, of the different trends and science that's coming out that I can share with them. But then it also helps with my writing because I understand from my client end what people are looking for, the questions that a lot of people might have. And then also, I think that it makes me a better writer because I kind of have that, those conversations with like the consumer, like that person that I'm writing to regularly in my practice. And so it makes my writing, I think, more relatable, kind of like I'm writing to a client.
Yeah, I agree 100% because those people
Yeah.
represent so many other people, thousands of people who would really like to hear the same information. So
Mm-hmm.
I really agree. I love getting stories, and my patients love to tell me, "Listen, you need to write about this." So they love to
Mm-hmm.
give me assignments, and they're very
Yes.
happy when that kind of stuff comes out because it really also shows them that you really care about them and that you're listening to them.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. And I would say, just as an aside, for anyone that's seeking, new writing work or work in media, I would definitely point out, like, if you do work with clients or if you do work with the type of people that, in your space that you might be writing for, then I would mention that to when you're pitching to a client, a potential editor, or if you're applying to a job, writing job, and letting them know that this is how you stand out. Because, and of course, there are tons of amazing writers that don't work actively in private practice or with clients. But if you want to make yourself stand out even more, sharing that you also do that because that really helps you remain relatable. And sharing that as an aside, I think, is a great thing to do.
Yeah, really, really good. So we know that you wear many hats already, as we've heard over and over today. But how do you do it? Do you particularly do it while you have children, while you have a lot of other things going on? You may also be writing for different publications on completely different topics simultaneously. How do you organize yourself? Do you do a lot of writing at night? Like I know for myself, in the middle of the night is when I used to write my stories on
Mm-hmm.
paper in the dark because that's when ideas
Quietly.
would come to me very quietly, as quiet as it can be, without flipping the
Yep.
pages. In the shower, when I'm driving in my car, like all these things come to me then. So when do you usually find the time to write?
hmm Yeah, so I'm very much a morning person. So I like to write. It sounds a little bit crazy, but I love to get up. If I really have a lot of a deadline or I'm extra busy, then I'll get up at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and that's when I actually have my best writing work versus at night. At night for me, I just want to relax, and I've tried many times to do writing work specifically, and it just doesn't work well for me. I don't have the mental focus. So I think knowing if you're trying to balance multiple roles, I think knowing when you have the most energy and focus is really important because you're going to get the work done so much faster and easier with doing that. And something like writing, it does require focus and kind of, minimal distractions whenever possible to do the work well. So I think finding that quiet time, and if you do have young kids, definitely in the early morning during nap time, if your kids are home with you, or any of those chunks of time where you have kind of that uninterrupted time as much as possible is going to be really helpful. But in terms of other ways, I try to stay organized and kind of manage all of the different responsibilities of my business is I have systems, and I have a virtual assistant. So I didn't always have a virtual assistant, but I hired a virtual assistant about a year and a half ago. And so there was a good few years where I didn't have an assistant. I was doing it fully on my own. But I realized over time, as I started picking up more writing opportunities and had multiple clients, it was a lot to manage on my own. And there was maybe one or two times where I almost forgot to submit something. I never actually forgot, but I knew that I was getting to that point that I was becoming too much for me to manage on my own. And so I have a virtual assistant that works for me 5 hours a week. And so she manages a lot of the back end stuff that I don't either want to do or I don't have time to do. So like my managing my email inbox, my weekly newsletter, social media posts. I provide ideas for her. So I give her kind of like a starting point of the topics and things that I want to talk about week to week. But she does the actual implementation of like creating the posts, creating the newsletters, etc. So that's super helpful. It does take time, of course. So, and I know you've mentioned this on I think one of your podcast episodes I listened to, Bonnie, that you feel like initially it could be challenging to like have someone, write in your voice. So that does take time, I think, to kind of train someone to do that. It could take a good 6 months. But if you have the right person that's willing to learn, it could be super helpful and kind of just a nice load off your shoulders. So, so the virtual assistant is hugely helpful. And then systems, I don't have any fancy systems. I wish I could share that I use these fancy, organizers. But right now I don't because I just haven't had the bandwidth to pursue it. But what I do is I have, for every writing client that I have their own Google Drive that I've created where I have any articles I've written for them, any guidelines that they have. And then I have my own sort of spreadsheet of everything that I have that I'm working on week to week in terms of like due dates, the outlet I'm writing for, any quotes that I need, kind of like all the steps to writing the article to keep track of all of it. And I check that every morning and every afternoon to help just like give me a focus on what I'm working on, what the priorities are, so that I don't, kind of get distracted with any other unimportant things.
Yeah, that's important. And putting things on your calendar. I
Mm-hmm.
think that I find
Yep.
that to be helpful and not having a
Yes.
ridiculous to-do list. Like I have some ridiculous
Yeah.
to-do lists, but in the morning when I wake up, I try to say, okay, what do I really, really need to do today? Like not like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it'd be really nice if I could do this, but no, I really need to do this today. And then sometimes I'll even handwrite that because no matter what, I
Mm-hmm.
really have to do those things. So yeah,
Yes,
that's important too.
for sure.
Melissa, it has been so nice chatting with you. And I have two more questions for you that I ask for all my guests. But before we do, just let our listeners know where they could find you. And I will have all this information in the show notes. So where can they find you? And also we'll put information about where they could sign up for your newsletter as well.
Okay, that'll be great. Thank you. So I'm the most active on LinkedIn. So you could just find me directly on LinkedIn, Melissa Mitri, RD. And I'm also on Instagram at theweightloss.dietitian.
And could you spell your last name?
Sure. So it's M as in Mary, ITRI.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay,
Sure.
so my last two questions. If you had the chance to send a message to your younger self, what would that message be?
Yes. So I would say my number one recommendation would be to just trust your expertise. And because this is something that I've seen in many different fields and especially with dietitians, when I've mentored some dietitians and writers, a lot of us have imposter syndrome, whether we have 2 years of experience or 10 years of experience, and feel like, you may feel like you don't have enough experience to call yourself a writer or a media expert or any other, sort of name that you're trying to pursue. But you have to trust in your expertise, because typically you're going to know so much more about the field than the person even that may be hiring you. And they want your expertise, and know that, trust that you have something to offer. You should promote it and show it in every way you can, because that's how you're going to build trust in others. And showing, so even if you're not a writer yet, go on LinkedIn and say that you're a writer. Even if you're not a media expert yet, go on LinkedIn and say that you work with media. You don't have to have a ton of clips to prove that. You have to establish that name for yourself first, and then you start looking for the opportunities and learning. Because the only way you're going to learn how to do it well is by doing it and pursuing those opportunities.
Yeah, that's a big one. I didn't call myself a writer, even though I had my own column in a newspaper and then my own blog in a newspaper. I didn't call myself a writer until someone said, wow, you're a really good writer. And then it's like, well, maybe I actually am, but it took a long
Yeah.
time. So I agree with
Mm-hmm.
you on that one for
Yes.
sure. And if you could offer one piece of advice to someone looking to break into media and secure consistent work as you do, what would that tip be?
Mm-hmm. I would say just be persistent and keep following up. Working with the media is not for the faint of heart, and you can't take a lack of response or a no personally, because it's really not personal. If somebody isn't responding right away, or you feel like they're ghosting you, or maybe they responded initially and they didn't respond the second time, it doesn't mean that nothing's ever going to move forward. Media work can be a long-term game, where you may not get the opportunities right away. But if you keep nurturing the clients that you do have, so if you're just getting started and you have just a couple clients, and then asking for their testimonials to share, is just being patient with the process and knowing that there are a lot of variables why somebody may not respond right away. Maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe they don't have the budget right then. But keep checking in, even if it's just a quick hello every couple of months, letting them know that you're still available and that you're there to support them when they have that work for you. And then one more thing I'd recommend is not only to build relationships with editors and those in the media, but your peers as well. This is something that I've noticed in my own business being super helpful. And I initially wasn't doing it to get more writing opportunities, but just as a way of connecting with other dietitians in my space. But getting to know only it's not just getting to know those who would be hiring you, but also those that work in the roles that you want. So I think that's also really helpful, because you can learn from them and you help them by maybe providing expert quotes for them. And then eventually let them know that you're also seeking more work, even if they're not the person that is directly hiring you, but they work for an outlet that you want to write for. I've actually landed a few writing gigs from colleagues who hear of opportunities and then think of me because I've established that relationship with them. So it's not just the editors themselves that you want to establish a relationship with, but your colleagues and those that are in the roles that you want as well.
That is so important. And there's room for all of us. There are plenty of
Mm-hmm.
publications and plenty of people who don't necessarily want to do what you'd like to do. So, yeah, that is so important. So, thank you so much.
Of course.
And that is a wrap on today's episode of Media Savvy. And a huge thanks to you, Melissa Mitri, for showing us how and why you may want to get your words from your computer to a camera or to audiences way beyond someone who may just sit across you at your desk. Although those people who sit across you at your desk, if you have a private practice, are very important for helping to build your media presence. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship.
For sure.
So friends, if today's conversation resonated with you, I hope you'll subscribe to the show, leave a quick review, and why not share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. This is Bonnie reminding you that you don't need years of experience to make a meaningful impact. The show is for anyone ready to connect with media and be media. So let's connect on Instagram at BTD Media. And I'd love to hear from you, whether it's your burning questions or your biggest wins. And by the way, you're looking mighty media savvy today. So until next time, see you soon.